Hello, thanks for tuning into this video. My name is Zach. I'm a lifelong reader and lover of science fiction, fantasy, comics, manga, personal development, business, and everything in between. And today I'm jumping on the YouTube bandwagon that I've seen a lot on my own YouTube feed for the year in review, talking about their best books, favorite reads of the year, and a bunch of other booktubers talk about this. So I figured, hey, I wanted to look at my Goodreads year in review wrapped anyways, so this is the perfect excuse to go through all the books I read and figure out what were actually my favorites and why did I like them, or how can I narrow down this list to just 10 books. So looking through my Goodreads year in review stats, and Goodreads is what I use most of the time for tracking my books. I started to use Storygraph, but on Goodreads I read over 150 books, but the way Goodreads talks about it, it's also because I logged comics and manga, when one volume of a manga might be, like a 10-minute read, so it sort of skews it a bit. But taking away all the comics and manga, my number of actual books read were over 70. So I end up reading a ton of books this year, way blowing past my number from last year. And partly looking at my Apple Fitness stats, it's all from walking. So I have walked over 2.9 million steps this year so far, which is 1,402 miles of walking. So a lot of walking this year, just doing those afternoon walks during lunch break, walking at night, and just general using that as an exercise source. Also reading / listening to audiobooks during bike rides. So those are usually multi-hour events on the weekend. So that's how I read over 70 books this year. And from this huge list, there are, of course, a couple standouts. So out of this list, I'm going to first talk about some honorable mentions on my list, which were the nonfictions. So primarily going to be talking about my favorite reads that were sci-fi fantasy, but also read and reread a bunch of great nonfiction. Looking at my stats of when I read them as well. Towards the beginning of the year, I did kind of the stereotypical New Year's resolution thing and reread some of my favorites like Atomic Habits and Think Like a Monk. Some of these are great just refreshers to get my mind and headspace back in that New Year's resolution mindset of sticking to habits and goals like walking and exercising, things like that, to just enrich my life. So besides those just rereads, some of my favorite nonfictions that I would put as honorable mentions that you should definitely check out. Two that are sort of linked. One is Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, which is a great book on basically mindfulness and being more spiritual and mindful and just present in life, which is a great theme of mine this year. And related to that is also The Untethered Soul, which is also about mindfulness and kind of seeing your thoughts for thoughts and not tying them to your identity. So both books were more about being present. And I was also, of course, watching YouTube today and other days, and also the year wrap-up videos for what are your goals for next year. And the Daily Stoic, Ryan Holiday, talked about this on his recent video of picking a word for the year. And based on those two reads, I think it's going to be my word of the year for 2025, which will be just now, being more present, more mindful. I think I hit that pretty good 2024, but it can always improve. And then lastly, an honorable mention goes out to Co-Intelligence, which is just about AI and living and working with AI, as the title is, the subtitle for the book is. So it's just a very relevant book professionally through my master's in business analytics and AI and my job as a data analyst, technical analyst. So AI is just here. It's not going away. So I think it was a good book for learning and looking at AI as that companion, as that co-intelligence that is going to become more and more present in our lives. So those are my honorable mentions. And besides those nonfiction kind of personal development books, some other great comics and manga I read this year. I reread for the first time since college. So a long time ago, my first college degree, not these most recent ones. But I reread Slam Dunk, which was a long series, but great series, great writing. I've also read the author's other books more recently, like Vagabond, which is awesome, and Real, also amazing. So his, this really great author, and Slam Dunk, one of his first early breakout successes, still holds up after all these years. It's still such a great story with just really memorable characters. In addition to that, using my Marvel Unlimited subscription, haven't really read a bunch of heavy-hitting Marvel stories this year. I still kind of bounce between manga and comics, and nothing really stood out this year. I caught up on some of the X-Men stories, sort of the rise and fall of House of X, which is finally tying up some of the new Powers of X, House of X storyline. Great as an X-Men fan, but I do see the fatigue of it. Just there's so many X titles right now, it's really hard to keep up with things. I read a couple crossover events. I don't think I've done a video yet, but I recently read Infinity Wars, which was an interesting kind of rehash of the Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War saga. But this kind of like a what if Thanos died at the beginning. So interesting Marvel stories. Nothing really stands out. I am getting into the new Ultimate Universe comics, which I think are pretty good. The new Ultimate X-Men, of course, by Peach Momoko is really interesting, kind of an anime style take on the X-Men. So really interesting to see that different perspective. And just the general Ultimate Invasion I found was pretty interesting. I liked the maker, and I liked, of course, Hickman's run to lead up to the incursions and the whole Ultimate Universe. So those are my Marvel reads of the year, and manga reads, and nonfiction. So now, looking at my list, whittled this down from 70 plus books into just 10. Really hard to just even come up with criteria for why'd I pick one, but looking at my list, I kind of judge this by if I looked at one and then the other, which one would I rather read, or how would I rather read these? So with that kind of a lens to this, I looked at just enjoyment factor. Which one did I enjoy the most? Which one did I have the most fun reading? And would I kind of either still think about or want to come back to? So with that criteria in mind, my number 10 on the list is The Book of Elsewhere by China Melville and, of course, Keanu Reeves. So this book, I hadn't read the tie-in comic Berserker until after I read the book. But I saw this as a New York Times article that Keanu Reeves, action star, loved him in all of the John Wick movies and from Bill and Ted's and everything else. Matrix, obviously, fan favorite, one of my favorite movies from Matrix growing up in that era. But Keanu Reeves' book, had to check it out. The premise sounded interesting, even though I hadn't read Berserker, the comic that it's based on, in the same kind of shared universe, shared story of the main character. But, looking back at the year, it was a book that I just had a lot of fun reading. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There's probably some plot holes, but I just love the concept of this immortal warrior living through the ages and kind of spreading technology and using his knowledge of the past and kind of superhuman abilities. Obviously, this like regeneration kind of immortality he has. Just an interesting concept, a really interesting character. Not having read the comic first, I didn't get the self-insert that Keanu Reeves is the main character. Of course, as drawn in a visual medium, when you see the comic, it's like, yes, obviously the main character is drawn to look exactly like current era Keanu Reeves. It looks like he just stepped out of John Wick in the comics. But it's a really cool character. It's just like a reading / listening to the audiobook of a sci-fi action movie. So it was a great read, a lot of fun, just kind of this mindless action kind of check out a little bit, but you are kind of drawn into that lore of the larger world. So if you've read or I guess watched like Highlander, it kind of gave me vibes of the Highlander movie and TV series, where it's an immortal warrior fighting against kind of other warriors. In this case, it's the warthog that he's fighting against, but it kind of gave me those vibes of the looking at characters through the lens of immortality, which is what the Highlander series is about. Number 9 on this, again, looking at it from enjoyment and interest and picking just one book from a series, I would just put the series of the Broken Earth Trilogy. And specifically, if I had to pick one, probably the first one, 5th season, would be my number 9 for this top 10 list. The Broken Earth Trilogy was a great read. All 3 books were amazing. But the first book, as you're kind of just introduced to the world, really hit me maybe harder than the others. The second book delved deeper, and the third book did give you all the answers and kind of explain the whole thing, and it was just an info dump. But I think I liked the early book of just not really knowing everything that was going on. I like that mystery, the pacing. It's a little bit jarring, that first person, second person narrative choice that Jemison does. So it is weird, and it was hard to grasp what was going on, who's saying what. But it worked for the series. It was just an interesting choice, and just the world and magic system. So it's sci-fi, fantasy. I think you probably call it that blend because there's kind of technology. It's not really sci-fi, space sci-fi, but it's technology with a hint of magic. And it is a little. The magic is kind of based on technology. She tries to explain it that way. I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, it's just very interesting using the Earth as an enemy, and the Earth kind of hates us, and how humanity is surviving, what is going on. Really interesting. I had never read it obviously until now, but all three of them were great. It was a great trilogy. Number 8 for me, again looking back at stuff that stuck with me, would be Hyperion. It comes up at a lot of lists as greatest sci-fi books of all time, for good reason. I had never read it obviously till now. This is a first time read for me, getting through Hyperion, and it's a bunch of short stories, so it was interesting to not just be one specific narrative, but I guess it is one narrative because they're on the ship together, but these adventurers, as they travel to Hyperion, they're telling their own stories, so it's one larger story but with some sub stories in between. So it was great to kind of see the world through a bunch of different eyes and hear about their own travels. Don't want to spoil again too much, but the Shrike is a really cool concept, and this book is part of a larger world, all the other Hyperion books, but it does really make you want to figure out what is going on. There are so many great kind of little info drops of like the maze worlds, what is going on, why are there tunnels in the world, what is the Shrike, what are all these other things that happen to the characters in their stories, like the reverse aging, the cross, how is it connected, is it alien technology, is it some kind of magic, gods, what is the Shrike? It's just really, really gripping stories. It was a great read to just hear all these stories and be kind of left at the end with mystery. You don't really get the answer of what's going on, at least at the end of the first book. So I guess I do need to read more of the rest of the Hyperion saga. But at the same time, it does wrap up in the sense that it can be self-contained, that because the individual vignettes are kind of self-contained, we do get the resolution of each person's story, but the story of the whole crew together, we don't really know what happens next as they reach the time tombs and what is going on there. So it's definitely a series that I probably should put on my 2025 to be read list, or read the next one, Fall of Hyperion, I think it is. So that would have what I would put number 8. And then in the similar maybe genre of sci-fi stories, I put number 7, Otherland, the first volume of Otherland, because again, it's one of those books that I just really got engrossed in the world. So similar to Hyperion, which had great world building, Otherland has really great world building. I really felt myself in this world, this gritty future society of VR and what's going on. Again, you're drawn into that mystery. You don't really understand what's happening. Why are these kids getting abducted into the virtual world? You learn a bit about the virtual world, and you're just introduced to this really rich world building. And by the end of the novel, you're starting to see that there are other virtual worlds. So even though this book was written years ago, I think it's very timely because there's so much kind of AI and kind of not artificial worlds, but VR worlds, which we are seeing right now in 2024 with failed experiments like failed things like Second Life, which didn't really take off, but maybe I'm thinking of Metaverse. So as we kind of maybe failed too, but as we kind of get drawn more into the future, Metaverse may or may not come into reality, but things like this Otherland really makes you think of that kind of jacked into the Matrix, similar to the Matrix, similar to anime like Sword Art Online and other like dot hack sign, where it's characters that are kind of isekai'd into a virtual world, but what's going on? It just the end of the novel was a great kind of cliffhanger of we resolved a lot of the first things that happened, and then we're off to kind of open the world more. So I do want to read more of Otherland. I think it was a great first novel and definitely deserves all the praise it gets, and that's why I kind of chose it. Number 6. So looking at number 6, even though I did finish Rhythm of War this year, I finally finished the next Stormlight in prep for Wind and Truth after putting on my halfway done for over a year. But number 6 for me is a Sanderson novel, and that would be Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. So kind of like what I was just saying with Otherland, how it has vibes of anime like Sword Art Online. Yumi and the Nightmare Painter has anime vibes and video games vibes throughout, so maybe that's why I love the story. It definitely felt like Final Fantasy X, and I guess the other one is Hikaru no Go, where you don't really understand the story, but even just saying that, knowing that it's kind of like Final Fantasy X, kind of spoiled it a little bit for me, because kind of the big reveal in that movie or game is that it's all kind of a dream, it's all connected, and Tidus isn't really real, he's a dream. But so I had that kind of going in and was kind of piecing together the mystery of what is happening in Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. It's just a great story. It's great that it is self-contained, as opposed to like Stormlight, which is a sprawling world, but it is set in the Cosmere, so there is a little bit of familiarity, and especially in Sanderson's writing style, which I guess love it or hate it, I love Stormlight, so I do enjoy Sanderson's writing style. So everything just clicked for me, and it was a great self-contained story. Again, one that, with this criteria for the list, I just had a great time getting my way through Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Number 5 is another series that I had so much fun with this year. I think I got through 5 novels of Cradle. And if I had to pick one as the representative of my favorite of the year, reading the first 5, I guess I would pick Blackflame, which was book 3 of Cradle. Unsold, and like I just mentioned, had very much anime vibes. It kind of reads like Naruto a bit, where it's this, guy who is not the chosen one. He's unsold. He has no powers. But then, of course, things happen and he gains powers, and he's on his way to becoming kind of the most powerful. So it is this genre, the xianxia of like Chinese writing, kind of lit RPG is the style, where the character goes through just different training montages and levels up and keeps getting more and more powerful on their path to immortality. So it was a great world. I love the world. The novels are rather short, and they're just fast-paced action. I heard the criticism that book 1 wasn't that great. I found book 1 very interesting because it had so many of those familiarities to Naruto, and I just loved kind of listening to a manga, listening to an action shown in anime. So I really enjoyed Unsold. I think Unsold was still a fine book, but as you kind of learn more of the world, and the world building just grows and grows, book 2 and then book 3, I think, was where it really started hitting its stride for me. When he gets the Blackflame powers, it's just really cool with Orthos. A lot of great characters. And even up to now, so with the most recent Audible sale, I finally picked up 3 more novels in the Cradle series. So I am excited. It's on my list. I've already bought them on Audible. The next couple books of Cradle. Next one is Underlord. So I'm on Underlord right now. So I'm going to read that one. And just when I finish my current queue, I've got a bunch of Audible Cradle series to read. But Cradle in general, I think it was great. It's just a lot of fun. Yeah, it's not that heavy hitting, but if you want that just escapism anime feel, Cradle is great. I loved Cradle. And then switching gears slightly, this is a late addition to the list because I just finished it 2 days ago. So this novel is another classic that everyone's told me to read. I see it on tons of lists, and it's the Expanse #1, Leviathan Wakes. So this was the novel that I just loved. I burnt through it in over a couple days, and it's just that hard-hitting sci-fi. It was just hit all the right beats. The pacing was great, the story was great, the mystery, the action, the fact that it's kind of a grounded sci-fi. Grounded in the sense that everything's very real. You can really feel the world, that everything is happening. It's just a really great story. I really liked Leviathan Wakes, having seen some of the Expanse series beforehand, but never read the book or finished the series. Just a couple episodes of season 1. Yeah, I gave the books a shot, and it deserves all the praise it's get. I think the Expanse is a great universe, and Leviathan Wakes was a really great story. Everything wrapped up at the end in this first plot line. Of course, with more to come, you definitely it leaves open that there's so much more. The ending when Fred is talking about the protomolecule, it just what's going to happen next with the Belters and Mars and Earth, and even though we resolve one conflict, the rest of the world is wide open, and I do want to get more lost in the universe of the Expanse. So Leviathan Wakes, easy number 4 for me. Coming at number 3 for me in the top 3, this is another series, but if I had to pick just one from a series, it is going to be The Great Hunt. So number 3 is broadly the whole Wheel of Time. Again, I had never read Wheel of Time. I got into Wheel of Time this year. I've read the first 4 as of now, and the 4th one was fine. But number 2, I think I really hit for me the most out of the first 4. I was kind of looking at this, which are the best Wheel of Time books. A lot of people say 4 was great, but I think 2 was my favorite of the first 4, just because the first book was very Tolkien-esque. You're just introduced to the world. Not a whole lot happens until the very end as far as raising the stakes. But in the second one, which is the Great Hunt, the world opens up by that second novel, and you see so much more of what's going on with the powers of the one power, and then the Horn of Valir, and at the end, the final battle with Rand. I think number 2 was just my favorite so far. 3 was great as well. 4, I guess at the end of 4, when we get to the Aiel stuff, I did enjoy, of course, the Aiel stuff, but a lot of it was not so focused, and I didn't like the side story of Matt going back. But on this one, number 2 was great. And just to talk again broadly, because I've been dipping as well, I really haven't been enjoying my time in the Wheel of Time. It's a universe that I know it's super long, and it's just a world where every book's so long that I just kind of get lost in the world. It's not this fast-paced action, so it does contrast some of my earlier picks of Cradle, which is just action, 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 whereas Wheel of Time, as probably everyone knows, it's that just world building this rich world, visiting the other cultures, seeing what's going on with the characters. And as we kind of learn more about the One Power, it is getting more interesting, more kind of action-packed is from the magical standpoint. But it's just a great story. The writing's good. Obviously, a lot of braid tugging, happens in the books. But it's still just a great kind of cozy read for me. So I would definitely put it in the top 3 of the year. And Wheel of Time has just been great so far. I will continue reading Wheel of Time on to book 5 next. But then coming at number 2, switching back to, again, science fiction, I think ended up topping the list, even though Wheel of Time was a monster for fantasy for me this year. Number 2, for books that just made me think and enjoyment, was Anathem. This is a book that, I still just think about. It was so interesting. The world, speaking of world building, the world was just mind-blowing, the Mathic world. It was just very, very rich and interesting, and I loved kind of living in that world with Erasmus. It was just, very cool. I think that's a theme here. I love rich worlds and interesting characters, and Erasmus is great. The world of Anathem was just amazing, so interesting of how they view the world and the world they've created. Then you get to the aliens that are kind of not aliens, but multi-dimensional aliens. And just really interesting. Anathem was seriously cool. It was just a book that, you just still think about. It was so complex. I feel I probably didn't get everything, but it was just a great, really interesting read. Longish book in science fiction. Just a great universe. And that finally takes me to number 1. And I think the theme as I kind of go through this list is that it's another science fiction book, but it's a little more fast-paced than Anathem for sure, and it reads like a movie. And that my probably number one as far as for just enjoyment and being in the world and loving the characters was Project Hail Mary. So being in the world, yeah, this is set more in a grounded Earth, not like Anathem, which is like this interesting, cool future alternate Earth that I liked a lot. I like getting total escapism. But Project Hail Mary felt, that little bit of real that, yeah, this could take place in our world right now. But then obviously with, a little bit of, stretching the fiction part of science fiction with going to space and, figuring out everything that happens, during that novel. Not going to spoil it because it's just such a cool part of the book, being the events that happen in space. It's hard to talk about Project Hail Mary without talking about spoilers, but it was just a really great story. The characters are great. Kind of a little tropey situation where the main character loses his memory, so then we're forced to relearn stuff that he kind of already knows because he just temporarily has amnesia. So it is kind of that trope of learning through the eyes of a newbie, but he's not the newbie because he's himself. He's just kind of uncovering things he already knew. So it's interesting that sense that you are kind of shown the world through the eyes of a novice, but it is kind of just centered around this one character, because the whole book, most of the book, it's 90% of the book is about just, I'm not spoiling it, but 1/2 characters. So it's a very character focused book. Really interesting world as they're in this kind of semi close to Earth, alternate version with slightly advanced, physics and stuff as they go to space. But physics, I want to say, because everything is science-based, that it could happen in our world. It does feel really real that, yeah, of course all this stuff could happen. He can figure it out using his powers of math, that he can solve it and save the universe, basically. And anyone can do it. So the writing is from the same writer as The Martian. So if you like The Martian, kind of sciencing your way out of a Martian planet, this is the next scale of, don't just stop at Mars. What if he was stuck in the middle of the universe and had to save the galaxy kind of from this existential threat? So it was just a great read, listen. I'm excited for the movie that's obviously going to come out because it's just written like a movie. So it's very fast-paced, cinematic. Just stuff happens. The plot is always advancing. It's not more of like that cozy read. But yeah, Project Hail Mary was just a great book, really easy read, and it scratched that science fiction itch. So there you have it. I was debating whether to do like a tier list of all 70 books, but that would probably take forever because it's 70 and, with series and comics and personal development. But those were my top 10 science fiction and fantasy reads of this year. So thank you for watching this rather extended video. I hope it was helpful to get a glimpse of what I liked this year and a little, blur about each book of why I liked it. So thanks for watching and have a great day.